for the afterlife. The case of a man whose soul does not permit him to abandon his illusion all at once is similar. Let him move on to a lesser form of vice, and so it is with the remaining traits. Should the Shaykh see that the aspirant is usually under the influence of greed for food, he should oblige him to fast and to reduce the amount he eats. Next, he should instruct him to prepare delicious meals and serve them to others without tasting them himself, until the soul becomes stronger and he becomes used to forbearance, whereupon his greed will have been subjugated. And this is something, at some extent, we could practically implement in our lives, in our children's lives, is that you could, for instance, give your children, $10, and then ask them, right, to give away $2. Right? You could prepare a delicious meal and have your child bring it to the neighbor. This is something you could teach your children to give out and to teach them generosity by doing these type of techniques. And should he see that the aspirant is a young man longing to be married but cannot afford to do so, he should instruct him to fast. Should this not do away with his sexual desire, he should tell him to break his fast with water and no bread, or vice versa. Right? Just have water or just have bread on alternate evenings, and forbid him to eat any meat, and forbid him to eat meat or any other thing with his bread, until his soul is reduced to submission and his sexual desire broken. For at the beginning of aspirancy, there is no cure more effective than hunger. And I know all of this, for all us living in 2006, seems like a little extreme. But we were just listening to a tape yesterday of one of our teachers that we took from in Tarim in Yemen. And he was talking about how there was some of the Muslim societies, traditionally in the Muslim world, there would be common people who never would commit a haram action in their entire life. Right? There would be common people in some of these societies who never would even imagine someone else committing something haram in their entire life. It reached that level with the common people. So what about the elect? What about the elect of the elect? And when you look at some of the traditional societies at certain places in the Muslim world at certain times, right, this is not to romanticize that this was all over, that no one committed wrong. No, this even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there's people who committed wrong actions. But the point is that there is certain societies that have attained a level of purity that is incredible. And as an example, when we were studying in Syria, we stayed for 2 months in this place called Ghulta. And we were studying with one of the Mashaykh there, and he told us that there was such a level of innocence amongst the men and the women there, that some of the women there actually thought they didn't know anything about male-female relations. They thought when you get married, kids just come. They didn't know any details about how they just thought when you get married, then there's a kid just comes. They didn't know any of the details about it. But it's just a level of purity that they didn't understand that. And the same thing is in many of the in many parts of the Muslim world, this was what was there, is that people used to live very simply. You know, in the same city that we mentioned, that in Tarim, that people used to eat, their staple food was a loaf of bread and dates. That's what they used to eat. And water. That was their daily meal, was something that simple. And so these type of things were totally possible for them to implement. And this is why that there's the story called the Moroccan's Journey, where this man came to this traditional city and he described what he saw. One of his descriptions that he said about these people was, as he says, is as if they were angels, كَأَنَّهُمْ مَلَائِكَةٌ, as if they were angels. And the way that they were able to constantly be in a form of worship, the way that they were able to survive on such a small amount of worldly things. And so that this is something that was there with the ummah. And we're so immersed in dunya. And we're so immersed in shahawat. And we're so immersed in, look at our food. How much food do we eat? And what types of food do we eat? Probably 15 to 20 different types of food at one lunch. Right? Not spices and all these type of things. If our refrigerator just starts to not work very well, we all of a sudden freak out, or our dryer doesn't dry clothes as they should. All of a sudden the level of lives that we're living, we really have to look in into ourselves and see what blessings Allah Ta'ala has given. We're immersed in a lot of things to the extent that it's affected our perception of certain things. And to the extent that we've forgotten about how the majority of the people who have ever walked this earth have lived. Very different than the lives that we're all living. So, until his soul is reduced to submission and his sexual desire broken. For at the beginning of aspirancy, there is no cure more effective than hunger. If he sees that his is a predominantly irascible disposition, that anger overcomes him, he should oblige himself always to be gentle and quiet, and should make him serve and keep the company of an ill-mannered man in order that he might train his soul to tolerate him. That's one of the ways to learn good character, is just be with someone who has bad character. But to teach yourself, not to look at his faults. One of the Sufis habituated his soul to mildness and freed himself from excessive anger by hiring a man to insult him in public. You just imagine just walking through the, right, coming out here on Eid Day, right, and just say, I'll give you $10 if you, and there's someone walking out and just mentioning all these things about, you're a fasik, you're a munafiq, right, I saw you the other day, just mentioning all these things about something. And one time, there's one of the people of Allah who was walking down the street, and in front of everyone, someone called out. He said, "Ya munafiq, oh hypocrite!" And this person, he was an enlightened person, came to him, and he was smiling. He said, "Jazakumullah khair." He said, "Everyone else has been calling me by these other names, Shaykh and all this stuff. You're the only one who's gotten my name right." Right? That, subhanallah, humility. Right, and realizing that not only that's how they saw themselves. Because he really thought he was a hibber. He didn't become deceived by people calling him Shaykh or so-and-so, Imam, whatever. Right? When the person actually called him, not only did he not get mad, right, he said, "You're the only one who's got my name right." SubhanAllah. So, another of them, continuing this way until became characterized by a proverbial gentleness. Another of them felt the presence of cowardice and faint-heartedness in his soul, the weakness of heart. And wishing to acquire the trait of bravery, made it his practice to put to sea in the winter time when the swell was at his roughest. He wanted to become shuja' and brave. So he sailed during the winter. The ascetics of India treated laziness in worship by standing up all night on pillars, and one of the sheikhs at the outset of his own aspirancy, finding that his soul was lazy during his night devotions, for this reason forced himself to stand on his head all night so that his soul would willingly accept standing on his feet. Another treated his love of wealth by selling all that he owned and throwing the proceeds into the sea, fearing that if he gave it to other people he would be afflicted by self-satisfaction and desire to be seen doing this. All of these, it's the way these are understood. This has to be under the supervision of obviously someone who's doing this, and in no way are we saying that people should go out and do these type of things. Rather, that what's important, especially in this time, in any time, is balance. And we also have to realize, as something we've heard directly from our teachers, is that for most people these days are over, of these type of spiritual struggles. Right? And that at the same time, that the amount of, for instance, in terms of food, what people used to have to do previously in order to attain a spiritual benefit from cutting back on food, that we can attain now by stopping when you want to take 2 more bites. The same difficulty that it was for them spiritually to sometimes go for long periods of time without food, right? It's similar to us to just stop when we want 2 more bites. Just when you want 2 more bites, stop. And you'll attain that same benefit as that individual before would attain from leaving food for a long period of time.